Hey, Brainy, good to see you. This is a hybrid workshop because we have you and Jane, and in the room we have Paula and Alicia, and I'm in Sydney at the moment. So hopefully the audio is going to be good, and I'm going to stand up because I'm going to draw. Are we all good with this? Yeah. Okay, I shouldn't be about here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay, great. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you very much for making the time out of your schedule to be here. My background a little bit. The most important thing about this work and why I'm here is 30-something years. Yes, I'm older than I look. 30-something years of studying the work of Buckminster Fuller. And I was introduced to his work when I was in my 20s. And I've been a dedicated and applied student of his work ever since. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, and it's something that really drives me too, especially as I work on complex organic carbon products.
Right.
So,
yep. Okay.
So
all right, great. So Alicia is very here in the room, is very interested in the work of Bucky Fuller. So what I've done, the difference, he spent most of his time applying what he called nature's coordinate systems, or how nature works. He was doing applying it to things like buildings and houses and cars and cities and infrastructure. And so he was in the physical world. And one of his most famous designs is the geodesic dome, which is the most efficient way to hold space without an internal strut. You could actually put a geodesic dome over the entire Manhattan skyline, and it would be an incredibly stable system. They may have to do that one day for cities to keep them climate managed, unfortunately. But anyway, so I was fascinated by Bucky's work for a number of reasons, but predominantly because of the model he was in his life, how he lived his life. He was a demonstration, in my opinion, of integrity. He chose at the age of 32 to only do what was spontaneously arousable within him for the highest good, for the highest number of people. And he believed that if he did that, that universe, and he deliberately used the word universe, one universe versus the universe, because universe is us anyway, universe would take care of his needs. And so what I've done in my life with Bucky's work is I've applied it to human coordination, how we bring people together, how we actually create ecologies of synergy, and I'll go into synergy in a moment. So the background to that was I was one of the very early founders in the global coaching movement. That's back in the 90s. When I started in Australia, there were 5 people that I knew of that called themselves coaches that didn't have a whistle around their neck running around a sports field. As a result of that, I got into corporate work. I did a huge, I was part of a huge project with the ANZ Bank, which is one of Australia's big 4 banks, on cultural change, massive whole enterprise, 24,000 people enterprise cultural change program. And so I was taking Bucky's principles and applying them into teams and with leadership and with things like that. Similarly and simultaneously, and Bucky's work has made me a systems thinker just by being a student of his work, but simultaneously recognizing that our current systems are killing us, point blank, really, and that we can't keep doing the same thing. And so I'm running these 2 tracks, and at one point, which was when Syntropic World was born, it sort of really came into my being in 2018, I realized that I could no longer spend my time rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So in translation, what that means, I could no longer spend my time trying to fix the broken systems. One of Bucky Fuller's most famous quotes is, "Don't try and change the existing systems, build new models that make the existing obsolete." And so Syntropic World, essentially our work is to enable humanity to coordinate, collaborate, and co-create for a world with a future. Bringing diverse people together and having that work synergistically, as we know, is not easy. Human collaboration, human coordination, yet the big challenges that we have to face, including climate change, will not be solved unless we know how to bring people together. How do we do that? And so what I'm working on in presenting to you today, the title is A Flight Manual for Spaceship Earth. And we have, if anyone's interested in more detail on that, have you seen the podcast, Alicia, that's come out? So we have a wonderful 4-part special podcast that has been produced particularly for this week, where I speak. Guest number 1 is really at the human level. Then guest number 2, Sarah, is about application of this work to her enterprise, which is an NGO in Tanzania around reforestation, greening the planet, and so on. And guest number 3 is Cindy Ford, about the sort of the meta systems that we have to address and understand. And then number 4 is the future of how we handle this future in a syntropic way. And so a flight manual for Spaceship Earth was the term that was coined for this particular podcast series, and we thought we'd use it for the talk. What we're going to do today is I'm just going to give you some of the key pieces of what I call a syntropic enterprise. And for those of you not familiar, and I'm sure you are, Alicia, with the term syntropic, it was a term that was actually seeded more strongly. I don't think he was the originator, but with Bucky Fuller's work. And he describes it as meaning towards a higher order for an eternally regenerative universe. Syntropy is the opposite to entropy. So most people understand the second law of thermodynamics, which is we are in a disintegrating universe. Most of science believes that is true in all cases. In other words, the Earth is breaking down and there's nothing we can do. What Bucky Fuller argued mathematically and geometrically is that we live in a syntropic universe. Another way for me to language this is to say things that are syntropic are things like love, care, beauty, immeasurable, weightless, the things that we hold most dear in moments of trauma and need and on our deathbed. And that we know that if you love more and there are more people that love, there is never a scarcity. It's always syntropic. You can't love less, and you can't have less love unless we cut it off, obviously. But so it's syntropic. And so syntropy is towards a higher order for an eternally regenerative universe. A syntropic enterprise, we chose the language deliberately because enterprise isn't just business. Enterprise is any human endeavor. So what that means is it can be a family, it can be a community group, it can be an NGO, it can be a global corporation, it can be a startup, it can be whatever it is. When humans come together, it's an enterprise. When humans come together to leave everything better, that's a syntropic enterprise. Everything, this is not playing with words. Our intention is to leave everything better. That's a syntropic enterprise. So a flight manual for Spaceship Earth is a flight manual for a Syntropic Enterprise is another way of saying that, because Earth is enterprise humans. We're enterprising, our biology, we're enterprising. One of the core pieces of Bucky Fuller's teaching is that he wanted to understand nature's law, LAW, and he also called it the coordinate system of nature, how nature works. And most of us are familiar with this because we're dealing with nature's coordinate system all day long, every day of the week. So I know you all know what will happen if I release my fingers. There is no imagination required here. I'm not a miracle worker. The cup is not going to fly up. We know that we're under the influence and effect of gravity 100% of the time, 100% from the moment we're born to the moment we die, whether we like it or not. And you can't argue with it. You can't say, I don't want to have gravity do its thing. Well, unfortunately, gravity does its thing. And we can see it when we look in the mirror, that gravity is doing its thing on us, whether we like it or not. But so the laws of nature are operating always 100% of the time on us. And yet humanity has had the hubris to go, we know better. We're going to apply our design principles to how we do things versus go to the greatest university that we have ever, which is the one that we walk over every day and the tree that we sit under every day and the migration of birds that we watch and the patterns and so on. There's the university, and all of the encoded laws and a natural design ecology can be applied to human coordination, enterprise design. Yep. And you're welcome to ask any questions if you have any. So what we're going to cover is just some of the key pieces. I'm going to cover of a flight manual for Spaceship Earth. So I'm going to cover direction, a few of the operating principles, how to build the spaceship itself, leadership, because it's different than the one we know, and how to take care of our people and indeed our creatures as well, so all life. To give you a sort of a heads up, this is a high-cut piece of the deeper work that I cover when we teach the Syntropic Enterprise Masterclass. But let's start with direction. Whoops. Direction. So part of this is there's a couple of key pieces. There is the purpose. You can see that. I might have to just use black. There's the purpose. So people, can you see that? Is that seeable? Oh yeah. Okay.
Yep. So, all good.
So there's the and then we also have what we call the source idea, and it's pattern integrity. And I'm going to spend just a very short period of time on both of these because they're critical. So here's where we're going. An idea, anyone can have an idea. That I need to eat a peanut butter sandwich is as valid. But if we've got an idea to do something, to change something, to build a business, to come together, to create an event, we have an idea. At the moment that idea lands for us, at that inception point, that idea, while it may not have a form, it's ephemeral because it is an idea. We need to turn it into a form for it to exist. It has particular elements about it, which we call the pattern integrity. This is a Bucky word, pattern integrity. Things like the essential qualities and particularities of that idea, that no matter what the form it takes, you will see the pattern integrity present. So, for example, with Syntropic World, some of the key elements, the pattern integrity of Syntropic World, are things like zero exploitation. Now, that might not be possible, but we're holding the space for that. Zero exploitation. integrity in everything. Integrity is the essence, integrity in everything. Life is sacred. And when I say life, I don't mean this particular piece of life or this particular group of life. All life is sacred. And that every living creature has intrinsic value, and a purpose and a reason for being. Now, there's some of the key pieces of the source idea of Syntropic world. So I could manifest the form of Syntropic world in a million different iterations. We could have built a physical place. We could have a whole lot of different ways that we could manifest this. That's the form. It's not about that so much as it's about whatever form it is manifest in, and that changes over time. These pieces are non-negotiable. You will be able to see them no matter what the form is. You'll see them, feel them, taste them, experience them, touch them, no matter what the form. When we have clarity around these pieces, source ideas, pattern integrity, and we also know why we do this. So the source idea for Syntropic world was to educate. There's a whole lot of pieces. Rainey, yesterday you mentioned Syntropic funding. There's a whole lot of pieces that haven't come into form, but creating an entire ecology that supports human enterprising that is syntropic. And why we're doing that is because we know that unless we build a new model of how humans enterprise together, including new ways of accounting for value, new ways of new legal codes, new ways of being in community together, so on, then we're not going to make it in our world, because we can't keep re-engineering the same system and hoping to get a better result, essentially. And so the purpose is that Syntropic enterprising becomes common or ubiquitous, or normal operations, that type of thing, which is a very ambitious long-term plan that is going to go beyond my lifetime. Knowing that, we design everything from here to definitely replace me and to keep going after that time. The piece about the direction, this gives us directionality, and unless we know clearly what we're doing and where we're going, it's very hard to get motion. When these pieces are super, super, super clear, then it's a transmission. So let me give you an example of a transmission. Greta Thunberg, whenever she opens her mouth, there's no ambiguity about why she's speaking and what she's speaking about.
She's very straight.
Yeah. She's a transmission. Yeah. And then there are other people that we meet or see, or people that we admire, people from the past, someone like Nelson Mandela. Everything you could do, you could see, was above the mess of division. Transmission. No ambiguity. When it comes to this, that's the personal level. At the enterprise level, businesses that we love, no matter which way you cut, slice, dice, dissect, look under the microscope, explore, whatever they stand for is there in everything, That's a transmission. So that's the directionality that we're aiming for, is clear. The rest of the work that we're doing is really around the structure and what we're doing. So any questions on that piece?
All right, look, it's I think you've got a very big vision.
I have a very big vision. Yep.
Definitely ahead of where we're at.
Yeah. It's a big vision. It is. And one step at a time. One step at a time. So that's the direction. Let's have a look at the operating principles. This is, and I'm not going to go into all of these because that's beyond the possibility of this time frame. But the operating principles, this is kind of like the substrate, the field, the air that we breathe that we don't see, the water to the fish. It's the field that we're in. And we're kind of familiar with it because we've got two Macs and a non-Mac, and so the different operating systems in the room here, yeah? And so we're familiar with an operating system, but this is kind of like the principles that live behind that. And so I'm just going to go into three of them very quickly to give you an idea of what I mean by this. So the first one is the principle of synergy, which Bucky would call the principle of principles. And the interesting thing about this is a generalized principle. This comes back to nature's law. This is one of nature's laws. And in this case, I'm also going to spell it as LLRE, nature's law. Synergy, the actual meaning of it, people use this term way too often without actually understanding what it means. The behavior of the whole cannot be determined by examining the parts separately. So let me put this in a personal reference. Who's ever had somebody experience a part of you and judge you for the whole of you?
Just then. Just as I was coming in, because I'm not wearing makeup like most of the people here, because I've just had a week of it and I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
And I was judged as being potentially a dangerous protester into Low Part for the session they had there. I was frog marched in here really rudely. It was really intense. So if I landed kind of a little bit anxious, that's why.
Oh, wow. All right. So you know that the behavior of the whole cannot be determined by examining the parts separately.
She doesn't know anything about me, but she made some very wild.
All right, that's a bit scary. Yeah, so sorry about that. So let me translate this into another simple model. If you take a poisonous metal and a poisonous gas and an explosive metal, a poisonous gas and an explosive metal, and you put them together, you would never predict by examining the poisonous gas or examining the explosive metal that when they come together, they form a white powder that we sprinkle on our food. Table salt. Synergy, that's a synergistic response.
And it's like the most important mineral in the body.
Yeah. And here we are standing in a building that will not be here unless we understood synergy at the metallurgical level. And the interesting thing about that is that you don't take the most strongest metals and put the most strongest metals together. You'll just get brittle. You have to take some strong, some not so strong. It's the combination. And so creating a perfect team doesn't happen when you take the best of the best of the best and put them all together. A synergistic team happens when you take a diversity of people and a diversity of skill sets. Because the best of the best of the best will kill each other. They just won't work synergistically. It's the same with making champagne. Any great champagne maker knows that you don't create a champagne vintage out of the best. You create a champagne vintage out of a combination of some good and some not so good. This is synergy. It's true in all cases. What this also means is that 1 + 1 + 1 has to be greater than 3 for synergy to work. So ecologies of synergy means that when we're together, we are infinitely better than we are when we work on our own. That's ecologies of synergy. And I claim that the greatest exponential technology we have available to us is the human beings coming together in a ecology that enables synergy. Now, I want to point out, creating that ecology is not, it can happen by chance, but there is actually a design science to creating ecologies of synergy. And that's part of the work that we're interested in doing in Syntropic World, because many of us have had experiences of being on great teams where there is a synergy and teams where there isn't a synergy that fall into a messy human heap. Yeah, and so there is a design science to creating ecologies where we have collaboration and so on. It just, you know, it's not, it can happen randomly, but that is unlikely. It's a deliberate thing. So that's the principle of synergy. What this means in another way is that if you're working independently, if you're just working on your own, you're denying synergy present. Yeah. The only way we can actually evoke synergy is to work in partnership, bring others into that. Then we get infinitely greater response, as long as we get the ecology right. Yeah. Polarity, so that's synergy. These are just some of the operating principles of a syntropic enterprise. So polarity, positive and negative charge. This is a cell membrane. Just in case you're hallucinating about what it is. It's just a cell membrane. And a cell membrane actually has the positive and negative charge woven throughout its entire cell membrane. But in this case, I'm just using it here. If we have too much of one charge, if we have too much negative charge, what is going to happen is that the cell membrane is actually going to explode. So if you have a look at the current world right now, we have a lot of negativity going on. You can feel the amplification of this explosive potential at a geopolitical level. Too much positive charge is equally dangerous. Too much positive charge, everyone happy camp, everyone consensus, no one being strong enough to make an opinion, no one being strong enough to stand up and say, no, we can't do this. Too much positive, and we're going to get collapse. So polarity, though, is essential for existence. If you don't have the positive and the negative charge, this is at the level of how everything works. If we don't have the positive and negative charge, there is not a chance that we're going to have existence. You have to have. And so the principle that Bucky talked about was unity is plural at minimum 2 positive and negative charge. So when we're designing human ecologies, you have to design with diversity included. Same is antithetical to life. Too much diversity, too much difference, too much negative charge, and we get explosion. Too much niceness, sweetness, nobody speaks up, everyone wants to have consensus, and we're going to get collapse. It's a design principle that most people aren't even aware of, needs to go into the thinking of every human design, every way that we design people coming together. That makes sense? Yeah. And the final one that I'm going to share today, just as the operating principles, is the principle of perturbation. This isn't one of Bucky's, by the way. This is from Ilya Prigogine, who won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1975 for the theory of dissipative structures. Perturbation is, let me do a very simple diagram of what perturbation is. It's a theory of change. But let's just imagine that these are molecules here. They can be molecules or emotions or people or nation states, however you want to assign them an identity. Well, we've got these molecules and we're applying pressure on the system. So at the personal level, you just had a whole lot of pressure applied on your system, yeah, just before, yeah. What happens is when we have pressure is the molecules start to vibrate. And if we keep applying the pressure, the vibration increases. There comes a point, if we keep applying the pressure and it's not dissipated, there comes a point where there is a threshold crossed. This is a threshold. A threshold will be crossed. And on the other side of that threshold, there is a transformative change. The circle becomes a triangle. That's a demonstration of transformative change. On the other side of that threshold, there will be a transformative change. What Prigogine identified in the theory of dissipative structures is a few features. The moment of the threshold crossing is unpredictable. You can sense that it's coming, but you can't put a time date on it. It's unpredictable. It's irreversible. You can't go back. You can't go back from triangle to circle. Once your biology has changed, you can't go back.
That is so fascinating. So with this one example, I've just been thinking, all right, I definitely got way too dysregulated by that experience. I mean, it's really fun for me to say I need to make a dramatic change in myself,
right? In
terms of my level of emotional regulation to deal with shocks and stresses. So for me, I feel like that's the threshold.
Yep.
And it could be positive and negative, right? The change.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't have to be positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that he identified was that there, as a result of this, there is a release of energy, a release of energy. And so oftentimes, if you think about it, pressure, cross a threshold, hysterical laughter or breakdown in tears, the release of energy, transformative change. Yeah. But the interesting thing to know about this from the group process, so that's our interior biology, from the collective process, let's just say that this is Mary and Tom and Paul and Sue and, you know, whatever. We've got these people in a group. We've all had this experience and there's pressure on the system and we're all starting to vibrate. You can feel it, you know, like that pressure. If you're managing a team of people, or if you're managing a group of people, recognizing this and going, do we need to cross a threshold? Because that could be a deliberate design feature. We need to cross the threshold. Or do we need to pull back? So there's a timing to that. So I want you to imagine that you're in a group of people and there's all this pressure. And then Edward walks in and makes some funny, irreverent joke. Everyone's kind of like, and then they all break into laughter. What happens to the pressure? It's gone like that. And so understanding this is how systems work, is that we can have some mindfulness around this. A really great example from the world sort of background is the George Floyd incident. There was so much build-up because of the brutality of Black people. And why wasn't the person before George Floyd? Why was it that, you know, there's this unpredictability that comes where the pressure becomes too much, the threshold is crossed, and something has changed?
We have that with the Molly Tice first, that
Yeah.
horrible
Yeah.
killing that happened
Yeah.
recently before, so we've had this all parts of
Yeah.
which, and we've had this national range of marches that have come out of it, and a new call for action across the threshold as a country.
Yeah. So understanding this is because this happens to us as individuals. This happens to nature. This is a theory that happens in all cases, but just understanding that. And so it also means that if we need to go through a transformative change, there's likely to be this same type of experience. Yep. So I'm just giving you a couple of the operating principles that live behind a Syntropic enterprise. They actually live behind any enterprise, but most people haven't identified them, and therefore you can't work with them if you haven't identified them. All right.
Do you think these are the top three, or is it not the top three? It's just
Just the ones. No, just the ones. Synergy is.
Yeah.
No, just the ones I picked
Yeah.
for relevance
Yeah.
for today. But yeah, synergy. I would have spoken about synergy, but I think most people avoid polarity. They avoid that polarization, and most people are, understanding change and how to manage change when we're in that state, and knowing that it's essential is also something that people avoid. So I picked the last two just because we've got to start looking at those things if we really want to get something different happening. So the next piece I'm going to talk about is, how are we going?
This is great.
Yeah, that's good. The spaceship.
Oh,
God, I can't smell what I'm in front of people. It's so funny. I do this, Alicia, I do this teaching thing a lot, and whenever I'm in front of them, my spelling just goes out the window. The spaceship.
You're engaging different parts of your brain.
Yeah, I am. So the spaceship. How we get, so we've got the source idea, pattern integrity, we've got the direction, we've got the feel, the operating principles. Now we're building the ship, how we get there. So you've seen this already. This is my cell membrane. And it has the positive and the negative all the way through. And here are people. So this is the Enterprise. This is the spaceship. We've got a cell membrane for spaceship, or Mother Earth membrane, different type of membrane, atmosphere membrane. And here are the people. These aren't the aliens in that case, but here are the people that are interested in being part of this spaceship. The wonderful thing about cell biology, I do have a medical science background, so I know a little bit about this. The wonderful thing about cell biology is that it's one of the most, the cell membrane, which of course this is I'm drawing a flat sphere. It's not really a sphere, it's all sorts of different shapes. But the cell membrane is infinitely intelligent threshold crossing. It's a threshold crossing. It enables free flow of things that need to free flow. It prevents things from leaving that shouldn't be leaving. We don't want the mitochondria to exit the cell. I'm just going somewhere else to do my energy production, not here. But it also prevents things from coming in. We don't want the bad bacteria, viruses to come through the membrane and do damage on the cell. That's the aim of it. And so it has this gorgeous, intelligent complexity in the membrane, designed in the membrane itself. And so at Syntropic Enterprise, we use the cell membrane as sort of like the architecture thinking of how to bring people together. And so we have people here that want to be part of this. They love the purpose that we're gathered for, and they are inspired by the idea, and they're very, very in agreement around the pattern integrity. And they want to be part of this. So it's a threshold crossing. It's not a skip down the yellow brick road throwing daffodils and anyone can enter. It's actually, there is a, if you would like to be part of us, here's what we do. And in Syntropic world, we call this the Trust Manifesto, which is not theoretical. It's been used, it's been put into legal trusts and so on. So it's a how we behave with each other, how we handle upset, how we manage conflict, how we make decisions, how we talk about the money, what's transparent, what's not transparent. Think of it like a house. If you have a home and you invite guests in, and one of the guests comes in and they shit on the carpet and they break all your crockery. I'm being blunt here, but would you uninvite them? Yeah. And so when we have people come into a sacred space, because I think human collective enterprising has a sacred space element to it, then people agree to the Trust Manifesto of how we are together with each other. I learned to build this, by the way, because for many years I gathered brilliant, wonderful, wholehearted people together without any threshold crossing, and invariably it turned into a messy human heap. I won't ever do that again. There can even just be a very minimal in Syntropic world. We have a Trust Manifesto Light, a very, very simple version of, if you and I, Alicia, were going to work on a project together, we would sit down and we'd create a Trust Manifesto Light. We could do it over a cup of coffee. It's not this big thing. It's a place to start. And then clearly, as we amplify the relationship, so as the relationship, that's not going to do it. I should learn that. No, that's not going to work. I'm sticking with black. As the relationship gets stronger. So think of it like a martial arts. If you wanted to become an Aikido master, here you are out here, never studied Aikido. You go to a martial arts school, you get a white belt. If you want to go yellow, I don't know what the other colours are. I know that the centre one is black. And if you've got to want to go white, yellow, black, no one's saying, you've got to be a black belt. You have to be a black. I'm forcing you to black belt. You are choosing to be a black belt. When you look at the path to black belt, you know what the path is. You know that it requires an amplification of responsibility, of learning, and so on and so forth. So when people come into an enterprise at the first level, we're coming in as the white belt equivalent. We're clear about how we behave with each other. We're clear about how we handle conflict. We're clear about what happens and so on. This is enterprise-wide. There's no, this is not just for the people on the leadership team are exempt. This is entirely enterprise-wide. So we're clear about that. And then if we want to get more and more involved and become part of the leadership circle, then the pathway is very clear, and we're choosing it because we're going white, yellow, black. It's not a mystery. It's a clear journey. So having some form of threshold crossing where people have to do a little bit of heavy lifting to get in the door, in this case, agree to a trust manifesto. And we have another exercise, which I'm not going to get into today, which is complete the synergistic audit, which is a piece around value. That's the minimum requirement to go from, I love what you're doing, how do I become involved? Then we have to live it. We have to live it on the inside. It's not something that you stick in the drawer and sounds nice. It's actually a lived thing. We live it. If I have an issue with somebody, here's how we've agreed to deal with it. if we have agreed, because the trust manifesto is unique to each enterprise. So if, let's just say, for the enterprise that we're creating here, we agree that everyone is going to treat each other with respect as a first order of humanity. And Paula says something to me and it feels very disrespectful. I take the position that she didn't mean that because we've agreed to treating with respect. Now, if I get my knickers in a knot, there is the opportunity to go, okay, have you gone back to Paula and considered that she didn't do this deliberately because that's how we agreed to be with each other? It's a lived experience. Yeah, so elegant human coordination is a design science. There's actually an architecture to this. Geometry, the actual meaning of geometry is the study of relationships. And there is an exquisite geometry to how we bring people together that creates ecologies of synergy. But that's how to build a spaceship. People are on the spaceship because they want to be on the spaceship. They know how the spaceship operates. If I'm out here and I go, I love what you're doing, I love your purpose, and I am not, and I read this and I go, I don't like this, I don't want to do that. I want to be an asshole whenever I like. That's great. You just can't do it here. So this is where the choice point comes in. And this is also where the level of clarity around what this is needs to be clearly laid out. And if people are not clear about pieces, we have to support them to be clear about the pieces so that there is nothing obscure in that and they don't get here and realize that they're in the wrong place. That's the spaceship. Now we're going to leadership. Oh, here we go again. There's our cell membrane, there's our enterprise. So in a traditional model of leadership, it's that hierarchical structure. In a syntropic enterprise, this is where the leader, and it's stewardship. The leaders and the leadership team live in the cell membrane. They're holding the space for collective brilliance. And they're also doing many of the things that the cell membrane does. So they're monitoring the ecology on the interior. And they're incredibly sensitive to the ecology on the exterior, including not just the local, but the national and global, because you have to be. A cell in my big toe, in this spaceship Earth of my body, the moment I put a drop of honey on my tongue, the single cell in my big toe registers a change in sugar. That's how amazing the communication system is at the level of biology. So the steward monitoring the interior, monitoring the exterior, can definitely be involved in other things like strategy. And the other part of the leadership is they are the guardians of the pattern integrity. So in many traditional businesses, let's look at the common temptation of we need to get funding. Bring to Paula's area, we need to get funding. Along comes someone with the money, and the money has a set of conditions, and the set of conditions violates the pattern integrity. Well, you can say yes to that if you want to. However, if you say yes to it, then you need to know that the enterprise you're building isn't the one that you started with, because you violated the pattern integrity of the source idea. and it's just not the same thing. It's different. Have a look at every business. Google, for example, they didn't start out doing what they're doing now. There was a moment in time when Eric Schmidt and the other guy was offered money funding from venture capital, and the venture capital wanted to get their exponential return on investment, but they needed to do that through advertising. They made the shift to advertising, and they are what they are today. It happens to so many businesses because when it gets hard, we compromise this. And for me, from a living human enterprising, that's like saying, when our life gets hard, we're going to turn to crime, or we're going to do something that's morally and ethically in violation of who we are as a human. So the stewardship lives in this, and it's largely a holding. We're holding the directionality and the intention of the enterprise that we're creating from a agri and garden and permaculture and syntropic sort of space. This is like the land that we're stewarding, and we're infinitely in communion with the land, the soil, the waterfalls, as in the water falling, the water and so on, and the trees, and the larger ecology out here. And it's an incredibly powerful caretaker role. A healthy steward leader, or a healthy syntropic enterprise, the steward leader needs to have very little intervention with the people in here. If there is a lot of mess going on in here, there's a lot of infighting and dysfunction and bickering, then the spaceship design needs recalibration. That's the trust manifesto and so on. We need to change something about the architecture, because when we put people into an ecology where they thrive, just like putting any living thing into an ecology where they thrive, thriving is what happens. And so a healthy syntropic enterprise under healthy steward leadership, there is a minimum requirement for intervention here. You let people get on and be brilliant. And every now and then you need to come in, and every now and then you may need to adopt this type of leadership. As in, no, we can't do that. But it should be the exception versus the norm. The exception, because if we get the design right, it's not necessarily. The exception, if someone in here, in their wild creative enthusiasm, sees that we could do X, Y, Z, but the steward knows that if we do X, Y, Z, we're violating this. No, we can't do that, and here's why. Or if we did that, what would be the consequences? And do you see it's violating the pattern integrity? So it's a very different way of being in leadership. How are we going?
This is just fantastic.
What happens, Christine, if we've got toxicity in our stewardship? Like if there's literally a leadership team of 3, or 5, and there's one that's kind of toxic to that pattern integrity anyway, would that just naturally?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because what we would need to do is we need to come back to, it's the architect, we need to come back to the founding, I would go back to basics. Let's all reconnect on the source idea that we're there. Let's all reconnect on the pattern integrity. Let's all reconnect on the purpose. If there's no ambiguity around that, now let's go to the agreements that we hold with each other. And if the stewardship team, when you have a team, because we are creating cultures of synergy. And as I said, there's a design science to that. What that means is that throw anyone together, even under this, and there are going to be combinations that just don't work. Like if you add sodium and chloride and potassium, you're not going to get table salt. You're going to get something else and might kill you. And so there's nothing wrong with the potassium. So if you've got 3 people, one person, and they're not creating this. Well, we either change the trust manifesto. We do all of the things, the communication pieces, which is the piece that I was getting to, but we do all of those things. If that's still not working, then we either change the trust manifesto, or we consider that one of these people is the potassium to the sodium chloride. How do we then find a different place for them to be where they're going to be synergistic with another team? I mean, when I originally applied all of this, which Alicia, I created an event, this is how I met Mark Rowland, who's the person behind all of this. I created an event on the Gold Coast called Big Blue Sky. Mark was one of my keynote speakers in 2015. And we used every single one of these principles to create that team, and a team of 12 complete strangers co-created a world-class event without a single human upset over 6 months using these things. But one of the things that happened during that time was we had one of the team members, and they were all volunteers, one of the team members had a little rogue element, a little frictional rogue element going on there. And so what we did, he had, because part of what happens in the synergistic audit is you could select how you want to participate here, which is a whole other conversation beyond this. But what we did was we looked at him and we're going, okay, so he has this particular set of qualities. Why don't we go to him and say, how about you do this role? Not the one that he had chosen. And we knew, based on his character, that not only would he be better at that role, he would love it. He took that role. He was just... So we gave him the role of looking after all the keynote speakers. So he was there, like, run around, go to, whatever. He did a brilliant job. He kept out of everyone's way, and he loved it, and he felt completely seen. So that's taking the potassium. There's nothing wrong with potassium, but just doesn't work with sodium chloride.
So it's be a different membrane.
Correct. Take and create another ecology where they are in a synergistic ecology. That's why it's human coordination is a design science. There's a geometry to it and a science to it. And what that does, it enabled him to never be wrong, to never be, we didn't have to. In most companies, the people haven't got this agreement, so we don't have that ground place to start. But when you have that, and so we're all there for the right reason, and we've agreed to behave with each other for the same reasons and so on. If we have someone where it's not working synergistically, how do we change the geometry so that they can find their synergistic home space? And that's part of the stewardship team, because that's what we're stewarding, the ecologies of synergy. So, and because people are interesting, you're going to get the people that are positive, and they just repel each other. Nothing wrong with them as people. They're both great people. They just can't be together and become synergistic. At this moment in time, anyway, that may change. So that's the piece around stewardship. Going all right, and then the final piece that I was going to share on the flight manual for Spaceship Earth is human enterprising. Human enterprising. So we come back, you got this, and they come back to here. This is how we communicate and are together. So communication, development. In a Syntropic Enterprise, as we're building, as we're creating the thing, the source idea, pattern integrity towards the purpose. And we're doing it as a community, as in people coming together in enterprise. We are developing ourselves and the whole. So we're growing up together, we're becoming better. When that enterprising finishes, we should be able to walk away. If this is where we started from a developmental learned skill point of view, we should leave, with this, where we're infinitely more evolved than when we started, collectively, individually. And so this is the communication pieces. We have to support people in how to speak to each other. We have to give them education around being in relationship and supporting the development. The application of the Trust Manifesto is the threshold crossing, creates in its own application a self-developing organization. Like you can't not have that if we're applying this. Everyone gets to grow up together, because when the friction happens, we learn from each other. And so one of the key pieces that we teach, and one of the loved pieces that I teach around this in the masterclass, is clean communication. I'm just going to give you a very simple version of this. So clean communication. So in a Syntropic Enterprise and in my life, clean communication is non-negotiable, period. What it means, simply, is that we have Mary and Paul, and they're in communication with each other. And we're talking about, for this situation, we're talking about charge. So if you have a charge, if I have a charge, it can be anything from overt anger, sick in my tummy, to just a little prickle that you wake up in the night after a conversation, you go, something about that wasn't right. It was sitting there and it just wasn't right. So a charge can be anything from tiny to major anger or major blowout or major whatever. So Mary and Paul are in conversation. And in this particular circumstance, Mary is not deliberately doing anything, saying anything, or attempting to cause a charge. She's not digging, attacking, ridiculing, shaming, or otherwise Paul consciously or in intention. Happens a lot. But Paul registers a charge. Might go away and go, nah, I don't feel right about something that Mary said. It's common, happens all the time. If Paul does what most humans do, he does nothing about it. He'll come back into a conversation with Mary and he'll be looking for evidence about the charge, and he'll usually find it. It's a self-perpetuating circle. He'll usually find it. If nothing happens, it gathers. There are people that are carrying charges about other people that they've had for decades or generations. About other people, other races, other groups, other whatever. They're carrying charges. The principle of clean communication is that the person who registers the charge, in this case Paul, is responsible for cleaning up his charge. The person who registers the charge is responsible for cleaning up the charge for himself. They can't clean up if Mary has a charge. They can only clean up his charge. So in the circumstance of Mary and Paul, a simple exercise, he walks away from this conversation that happens on Tuesday. On Wednesday, he goes, there's something about that conversation that, it's just, just doesn't feel right. It's either in him, he needs to reconcile something in himself. So, for example, I had a phone call with my mother some time ago. She said something to me and I was just like amplified. Seriously amplified. Sensible enough to exit the conversation fast without doing any damage. I spent 2 weeks looking at why I was so charged, recognised it was in me, I needed to let it go, and I didn't step back into another conversation until I could be charge-free. However, sometimes it is, Paul needs to go back to Mary and say, Mary, that conversation we had on Tuesday, you said that. Can you help me understand what you meant by that and why that was, and so on? And we can clean it up. So the idea of clean communication within a Syntropic enterprise is that if we live the principle of clean communication within this enterprise, then whenever there is charge happening, which will happen, I mean, we're humans, it happens to all of us, we attend to it so quickly that it never becomes this fully blown, monstrous thing. And in most of my work, when I was doing the, and I still do it, and work in corporate and teams and so on, the majority of my work and the majority of where I was paid was cleaning up this between people. That is beyond this. It's become a partnership breakup, marriage breakup, cost, financial, huge. The one I'm dealing with at the moment is in a business scenario, and it's, you know, the price at the moment is about $1.5 million for the charge. Yeah, that's the cost of the business. And so clearly, how to have those conversations when charge is present is also a skill set that we need to give people. We need to give people the tools to be able to be with each other in diversity while we have polarity and not have it turn into a messy human heap. So there's a huge focus on human enterprising. And a part of that is a deep recognition of the humanity of each of us that are part of this team. Because what we're working with in here is people who have commonly come together around a set of principles and values and ways of being in relationship to each other. So we're not talking about people that we don't know on the street who think it's perfectly okay to get online and just be horrendous in trolling and hate speech and commentary. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who have come together under an agreement that we all hold for each other. And then it is continually, it's an auto-poetic process, continually reminding people that this is how we operate. And that there is a process. If two people can't move past clean communication and get that charge clean, then what's the next step? And what's the next step? And what's the next step? That all lives in the Trust Manifesto. And it should only ever escalate to stewardship level when they've gone through the first steps. You know, we have to start being responsible for the quality of our relationships. That is, what have I done? Yeah, well, there we go. I've actually managed to do that in quite a short amount of time.
And this has just been amazing as a journey. Wow.
Yeah.
So rich.
So that's the short version of, that's what I had, the short version of the flight manual for Spaceship Earth. And clearly there is a lot more behind it. Yeah, so, you know, all of those things are what I'm lucky enough to work with people on every day. And yeah, we teach all of that in the, we go into it in a lot more detail in the Syntropic Enterprise Masterclass, where we go into a lot more depth. We do a lot more work in the communication pieces. There's a whole lot of other models around that. And so, but yeah, that's kind of the bones.
Just like so much food for thought. Like, yeah.
Well, I think every time you see it, so I've been working with Christine for probably about 2 years, I think. Now, I did the masterclass probably about 18 months ago, maybe. And I think when you come to it, you're in a different place. So now that I've kind of heard it again, I'm now thinking about a different set of circumstances than I was 18 months ago. So yeah, it continues to live and breathe.
Yeah, it does. And that's one of the reasons, Alicia, when I teach the masterclass, it's all online. When I teach the masterclass, I used to do it virtual in person until COVID, and then we went completely online. This was our first attempt at doing it in person again. I'm glad you showed up.
It's the thing that was the most exciting to me all day, because I'm very much into syntropic farming,
yes,
and I just saw syntropic in the content. I was like, I'm sure this is going to be something fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we had another guy who couldn't make it. He saw the same, and he had the same similar background. We actually have quite a few syntropic farmers as part of the syntropic community, yeah. So
it's not an area I'm personally in, but it's one I've been very inspired by. Yeah.
What do you do?
I'm a slashy, so I have a number of hats.
A slashy.
That's what sometimes we call ourselves, career slashies.
Yeah.
But we have
2 o'clock.
Yeah. We're good till 2 then.
Yeah. So basically I produce events, bringing people together, and everyone else is exploring, mostly looking at like whole industries or key industry challenges or key social change challenges need to happen, bring together all the key stakeholders to drive some kind of positive change. That's one of the hats I have, and also like analysing the market sometimes and just doing like the analysis of the change that's needed. That's the main kind of thing I've done. But I also, I guess, historically came from a soil science, molecular biology, plant science, fungal biology background, which I'm gradually returning to. So my main thing I'm here at Climate Week focusing on is a new startup I've launched, which is called Field to Boundary, which is looking at a circular solution for aromatic carbon feedstocks into industry. So like one of my original founding goals was looking at replacing alternative. I studied these microbes in my grad dip in 2013 as part of this journey back into science. And yeah, they can convert any kind of organic material. Cycle it. Very complex aromatic carbon without the need for burning, and with all you have to do is basically provide them with certain physiological conditions that really promote their flourishing. So it's very different to what anyone else that I found is being in the biotech space, of focusing on the conditions for growth rather than picking winners of the best microbe. I'm trying to just work with nature. And
focusing on conditions for growth is a Syntropic Enterprise.
So that's why I was going to join into this. With the very ground floor of this process of launching this new biotech startup, I've got the both, I guess, the market, like global industrial market intelligence that I need. I've got the biotech brain skills to steward it. But I don't quite have the skills to do the whole thing, because I'm going to need much bigger nerves than me in the middle of my brain. But I feel like I've been really much called to do this one particular thing as part of my process, and it's very interesting to me, this whole process, because it's given me a lot of clarity. I'm looking at team building, and I was going to go to this co-founder speed dating tonight at the Foresters as part of this thing. I'm not now. Because it's just, I got a very strong no. Because I think it's not a speed dating sort of thing I need. It's a very careful process of exploring who has synergy, rather than giving too much of what's in the middle of the membrane away to anybody.
I understand. So this is nothing that I'm teaching here doesn't exist in the way nature coordinates. And the language might be different, and so on, but that's really that, and that sort of takes it back to Bucky's work, which is really applying nature's coordinate system to how we bring people together to do things that matter for a world of the future.
The membrane analogy is brilliant. I love it as a biochemist who's obsessed with cell membranes, like studying that in undergrad. It was just like just the crazy forms everything takes. It's like a magical world of monsters inside our bodies that we just can't, like if you wrap your head around it, you can't.
No, you can't.
It's not possible to wrap your head around the complexity of the cell membrane.
It's not possible to wrap your head around. I did anatomy, medical science.
Yeah.
So, you know, the more time you spend in a medical lab, the more you just go, we know nothing. Like, we know nothing. And this is just the most complex thing. So you do that here, and then you look at the blue dot, and it's just like, oh,
it's amazing.
how can we even think that we've got this figured out? You know, like,
not be arrogant enough to think that we can do it better than nature.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. And yeah, trying to bring these principles in, and it's so interesting also this clean communication and charge and talk around that and all of these foundations. I think it's just, this is something that I'm definitely keen to do your program, and I think it's, yeah, I feel really lucky I kind of stumbled upon this.
Yeah.
Well, you had to fight your way here.
Yeah.
You were meant to get, you had a threshold crossing, right? You did.
Yeah, you had a charge and you had to cross a threshold, and there was some perturbation. Mark, well, do you know Mark from his
I haven't met him yet, but I'm keen to engage down the track. I haven't really had much connection with the greenhouse guys yet.
Yeah.
I've met Harry a little bit and had a few little chats. He's lovely, and my close mate Dane's been working with him on space management. He's an amazing, he's a very syntropic individual.
All right, there you go. Well, Mark Rowland that's why I'm here, because Mark, he's done the masterclass, and he's wanting the whole Climate Action Week Sydney to become a Syntropic Enterprise. Because of the runway we had for this first year, it wasn't possible. But over the next year, I'm hoping that that's what will happen. It'll be a demonstration.
Dane Murray will be very interested in collaborating around that. He helped do the mapping and was trying to do the space coordination, and he's like a real kind of like spatial organization, getting everyone in the right place in the right. Well,
I really appreciate you being here, and thank you letting me have an audience to deliver to you.
We still got the guys online.
What about all of those online too?
Yes, the ones online. Thank you, Jane. I don't know what happened to Brainy, but we lost him. Anyway.
It was fantastic. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane.